It started with a newspaper ad. Male college students needed. Psychological study of prison life. $15 per day, 2 weeks. 75 young men applied. 24 were selected. They were healthy, intelligent, emotionally stable. Psychologists tested every single one. None of them were violent, none had criminal records. Within 6 days, they had to shut it down because the people running this experiment realized they had just proven something terrifying about the human mind, something no one wanted to be true. That under the right conditions, any person, any ordinary, decent, educated person can become a monster. This is the story of the Stanford prison experiment, the most disturbing psychological study ever conducted, and what it revealed about every single one of us. The year was 1971. America was at war, not just in Vietnam, but inside its own borders. Prison riots were erupting across the country. Guards were brutal. Prisoners were treated like animals, and nobody could explain why. A young professor at Stanford University named Philip Zimbardo had a question, a dangerous question. Was it the type of person who became a prison guard that made them cruel? Or was it the role itself? The uniform, the power, the permission? He designed an experiment to find out. He converted the basement of Stanford's psychology building into a mock prison, complete with cells, solitary confinement, a prison yard. He randomly, and this is critical, randomly divided his 24 volunteers into 2 groups, 12 persons, 12 guards. The guards were given uniforms, mirrored sunglasses so prisoners couldn't see their eyes, wooden batons, not to hit anyone, just to carry. The prisoners were given smocks to wear, no underwear, a chain on one ankle, a stocking cap on their heads, and a number, not a name, a number. Zimbardo made one thing clear: guards could not physically harm the prisoners, but they could create psychological discomfort. They could enforce rules. They had total power over every moment of a prisoner's day. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. Everyone agreed. Everyone signed the forms. And on August 14, 1971, it began. Day 1 was almost normal. Guards were awkward. Prisoners laughed sometimes. It felt like a game, like theater. Then came Day 2. The prisoners rebelled. They blocked their cell doors with their beds. They tore off their stocking caps. They started mocking the guards, and something shifted in the guards. They called in the other shift early. They made a decision. If the prisoners wanted to fight, they would fight back. They used fire extinguishers to blast the prisoners out from behind the barricades. They stripped them naked. They took away their beds. They put the leader in solitary confinement. And then they did something no one expected. They took 3 prisoners who had not rebelled and gave them their privileges back, their beds, their food, better treatment. This was not random. The guards were engineering division among the prisoners, making them distrust each other. These were not trained interrogators. These were college students who had been given uniforms and power. By Day 3, the prisoners started to break. One prisoner began crying uncontrollably. He couldn't stop. He screamed. He went into a blind rage. He had a full psychological breakdown. Zimbardo let him go. But the experiment continued. The guards began waking prisoners at 2 a.m. for count, making them do push-ups, making them clean toilets with their bare hands, referring to them only by number, mocking them, humiliating them constantly. One guard later admitted he had modeled his behavior on a character from a movie. A brutal, sadistic warden. He was performing cruelty, and he found out he was very, very good at it. By Day 4, parents were visiting and grew alarmed. A priest who had worked in actual prisons came to assess the prisoners and said these young men were already thinking and acting like real inmates. They had forgotten who they really were, and so had the guards. On Day 6, a colleague visited Zimbardo to conduct interviews. She walked into the basement. She saw what was happening, and she was horrified. She turned to Zimbardo and said, "What are you doing to these boys?" And that question hit him like cold water, because Philip Zimbardo, the man who designed the experiment to study how power corrupts others, had himself become corrupted. He had stopped being a scientist. He had become the prison superintendent. He had been letting abuses happen. He had been rationalizing. He had been so deep inside the system that he couldn't see what it was doing anymore. He shut down the experiment that night. When the prisoners were told it was over, they didn't cheer. They cried. Some of the guards were disappointed. They had enjoyed it. Think about that for a moment. Ordinary college students, 6 days, and they were disappointed that they could no longer exercise power over other human beings. The results sent shockwaves through the scientific world. What Zimbardo had demonstrated, and what the scientific community has argued about ever since, is something called situational attribution. The idea that behavior is not just shaped by who you are, but by what situation you are placed in. Put someone in a position of unaccountable power over others, and something changes in them. Something very old, something buried. And we never fully know if it's buried in us until the moment arrives. Stanford was not a single incident. It was a window. In 1961, a decade before Zimbardo, psychologist Stanley Milgram ran his own experiment. He told ordinary people they were administering electric shocks to strangers as part of a learning study. The shocks weren't real. The screams were recorded. But the participants didn't know that. 65% of them administered what they believed was a potentially fatal electric shock, simply because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to. Then came 2004. Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. American soldiers photographed themselves torturing and humiliating Iraqi detainees. The public was shocked. Politicians called it the work of a few bad apples. Zimbardo testified at the trial of one of those soldiers, and he said, "These were not bad apples. This was a bad barrel." The system created the behavior, because when you give people uniforms, authority, permission, and no accountability, the barrel poisons the apples. Every time. We see echoes of this everywhere. In how bureaucracies operate, in how social media mobs behave, in how ordinary people become instruments of cruelty inside institutions that reward compliance. The Stanford prison experiment did not prove that all humans are evil. It proved something more precise and more dangerous. It proved that under the right conditions, evil does not require evil people. It only requires a system. So here is the question Zimbardo left the world with. If you had been in that basement, which role would you have played? Most people say guard. Most people say they would have protected the prisoners. Most people believe they are the hero in their own story. But in the experiment, the heroes were almost non-existent. The abusers were ordinary, and the bystanders, the guards who didn't actively torture but watched in silence, they were the majority. Maybe the real lesson is not about the monsters. Maybe it is about the watchers, the people who could have said something, who could have walked out, who stayed, because the system made staying easier than resistance. Philip Zimbardo spent the rest of his career studying what he called the Lucifer effect, the process by which good people turn evil. His conclusion was both terrifying and hopeful. Terrifying because the transformation is faster and easier than anyone wants to believe. Hopeful because once you understand the system, you can resist it. The question is whether you'll recognize the moment when it comes. If you want more stories about the hidden systems, dark psychology, and the forces that shape the world most people never question, you are already in the right place. BENIWAL Archives Global covers geopolitics, military strategy, global power, and the deepest corners of human behavior. Subscribe and stay curious.